So the focus is on, again, on how people are thinking about care work and how we change the discourse and push forward a narrative that builds support for a stronger infrastructure around care work in this country. And so we have actually been doing work on how Americans think about care work and care workers since the very beginning of the pandemic. We actually launched this particular strand of research, I believe in May of 2020 is when we started. And what has been particularly, I think, important and fascinating for us in terms of the findings around how people think about care work and care workers is that care is, and caregiving is something that Americans think of as being an inherent character trait, right? You are a loving, nurturing, caring person on the inside. And that's what's really important when you're bringing, your care into a care work position. But what that does is it obscures the role of professional development, of developing skills, of working conditions, and of wages and their importance in creating better conditions for care work and for care workers. So care workers should be doing the work that they do out of the sort of loving care of their heart. And if they're doing it for pay, they're doing it for the wrong reasons, and they're probably going to do it really poorly. And so this has really important implications for how we're going to talk about care work and building support for care work infrastructure in the future. But I think my first question is about why is this thinking about care workers as being angels, of sacrificing their lives, of kind of even being martyrs, as opposed to thinking about working conditions? Why is that still such a dominant way of thinking?
Care is one, just like not valued at all, as it's invisible and it's not valued in our culture, and therefore also not in our policies. And this goes back to sort of, it goes back to sexism, this like naturalistic mindset of who is predisposed to care, that cares women's work, and to a very particular history of racism in this country where this was done, forced labor done by primarily Black women in homes, just deeply rooted attitudes rooted in sexism and racism and inherent just devaluing of care as work.
I want to share a quick story, which is that yesterday morning I took a taxi to a doctor's appointment, and I'm sure others on this conversation have dealt with this, but people ask you what you do and then you tell them what you do and they immediately open up about their care story. And well, he opens up and he tells me about the worker he had during hospice for his mother. And he tells me that he really loved this worker. And I asked, what did you love about this worker? And he said, I love that she was compassionate. And it dawned on me, and I felt this for years, that, care is a very personal, intimate experience. For a lot of us, it can be really crushing if we lose somebody, and we remember the people who had the compassion to deal with us in the ways that are proper, right? But we don't talk about, and it's a very kind of one-directional perspective on it, is that we see what did they do for us in my moment of need, instead of asking, like in all relationships in our society, that relationship is reciprocal. Like, what can I do for that worker as well, right? And I think care allows that.
The fact that it is a job, it is a profession for millions of workers. It is the way that millions of career professionals pay the bills and support their families. Mm-hmm. It all does get obscured. There is a suffering that is a part of the human condition. There's no question that, we will lose people and grieve. We will go through hardship we'll have our hearts broken. We will have to work hard. And that is just part of the human condition. And there are forms of suffering that are the result of systems that humans designed and therefore can change and redesign. They don't have to exist in this way. And I do think that because of how emotional and intimate and human care and care work is, it's harder for us to see that there are systems operating that were designed, that we can redesign and change.
What do we need to change in our discourse to build public support for those sort of more systemic changes?
And one is, I think, in my work, the greatest misconception that we see about direct care workers, whether it's a home care worker or a nursing assistant, is that the job is low skilled or unskilled. And again, it just requires compassion in the right person, et cetera. And that because of that, it shouldn't be paid more than barely above minimum wage. And that's a gross misconception. It actually requires significant skill and emotional labor and training. And it should be professionalized at a level that they can earn a salary and they can see a career ladder and so much more. And yet that's just a misconception. We all, if we don't need it now, we will need a caregiver at some point in our lives.
Especially this idea of care work as unskilled work or low skilled work, and that if we want to create good jobs, that it's all about upskilling the worker, when really it's about upgrading the jobs. And about seeing these jobs as equal to every other job that is contributing to this economy. And if you've ever spent time with a professional care worker, you know that it's like the level of difficulty, like emotional, technical, physical, is just incredibly high.
And so from where I sit, I think sort of at scale pop culture interventions where we can actually both sort of center the individual sort of experiences like Aidan, you just described, of care workers, of the people they're caring for, of family caregivers, but then also pop culture storytelling that connects the dots between those individual experiences and sort of the systemic context and alternate narratives around solutions. All of those things are very possible in pop culture. And I think that unless we are putting those out at scale, we're sort of, it's going to be really difficult just at the sort of level of, framing and discourse to kind of actually shift this long term.
So that does lead into my next question, which was about mobilization and about people being able to take action and join this narrative change effort.
So I would say to get involved in organizations, supporting organizations like PHI and Caring Across Generations and NDWA. These are organizations that all have a piece of this ecosystem that's really trying to move towards the same place of a more caring and supported future for all of us. And I think to really to be explicit and out loud about your care stories, ways in which care is a huge part of your life, and a really important part of our future as families, communities, and as a country.
I would say to people who are here listening who work for other organizations, care really connects to all the issues out there in a way that lends itself to both to really powerful narratives. And so come collaborate with us. I promise you there's a connection to your issue.
And so I do think that those stories should also be about solutions, like not only what am I dealing with, but what must we change in our government, in our industry, on our television sets, et cetera, to create a stronger caregiving system that centers workers. And what do workers need in their jobs? I think that those are critical.